Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another MarketScale community building webinar. I'm Tim Maitland, the host of the show every week, and I'm so glad that you're back, that we have many guests coming back to watch again and continue to learn, and we have many first-time guests in here today, and that's what it's all about, right? This is all about building community, so I want to invite you to keep coming back to these. They're every Thursday at 10 a.m., and invite your friends, invite your family. The folks in this room right now, we are spearheading the transformation that B2B needs to have, which is focused on less traditional marketing, less technical, and more community building. So I'm really excited. Today we have another great episode. We're going to talk a little bit about community, what it is. We're going to bring up a relevant news story. We're going to talk a little bit about my Longhorns, the fighting Texas Longhorns. And we've got a special guest, James Preble, MarketScale's director of channel sales. And James is going to come on and speak specifically about community engaging content through that of a sales rep. So we've got a really exciting show and some items there. So I'm going to just get the screen share turned on, and we're going to jump right into our topic here of from pitching to creating the transformation of sales. So, if you think about it, everything that's surrounding us today is really focused on community building and going direct to consumer. I don't know if you follow Robinhood much, but Robinhood has been in the news a lot, really probably the last year and a half. But what Robinhood has decided to do, instead of relying on a lot of the major broadcast networks and some of the other major sources to educate consumers like myself on, the stock market and trades that I should be taking and little kind of tips, Robinhood decided that they're actually going to build their own media. They said, you know what, we're going to go direct. We're going to build a little community around our media channel. And if people want to tune in and learn on how to invest or what to look for with different trends, they're going to tune into us. And we're going to trust that by doing that, we're going to build true fans. We're going to build a community around Robinhood. And by educating folks on the stock market, especially young folks as they enter the first time, we're going to be able to create customers for a lifetime. So it's interesting when you talk about channel building, when you talk about consumers, it really is everywhere and things that we see today. To kind of paint the picture of what's taking place in B2B, there's really the traditional way of marketing is essentially dead. I hate to be so blunt, but I think I've got to put it that way. Look at the traditional marketing, right? You have advertising. Well, I think Google is potentially getting sued yet again by the DOJ in regards to their advertising business. And it's because big tech, it's not effective. You can't trust where your data is going, and it's gotten way too expensive. And companies are trying to find ways to move out of advertising. You look at your buyers, as a company, and whether it's B2B or B2C, it doesn't matter. Buyer behavior has totally changed. No more do people want to be persuaded to buy. They want to be educated. They don't want to be educated through white papers and case studies and technical material. They actually want to be educated by their peers, people just like them. So companies can't focus on engaging with the market in a traditional way anymore. They got to evolve. They got to unlock more of the voices of the community. You look at trade shows. I personally like trade shows. I'm going to be at a trade show in 2 weeks out in Atlanta. I think it's the best community builder almost out there, because where else can you take a fireball shot and pat somebody on the back and stay out a little bit late other than a trade show? You really can't. But the problem with trade shows, it's not scalable, right? It's a $50,000 spend here, a $10,000 spend there, a $500,000 spend there. It's very station to station. And in 2023, we can't win station to station. We've got to be consistent. You look at the market uncertainty and the customers, right? The market, where are we at? Is it up? Is it down? Should we be cutting costs here? Should we be saving money there? It's just so uncertain. And our customers' attention spans, they've totally shrunk, right? They're so used to watching snippet content on TikTok and Instagram. And instead of going to movies and watching, long movies, they'll watch this more episodic series where the content's 45 minutes. And, they'll watch 10 episodes over time as opposed to going to a movie and sitting down through 1.5 or 2 hours worth of content. So all these landscapes that are forming are kind of challenging the B2B community to evolve. Now, the way they're evolving is they're saying, you know what, we're a business and we have a community and we need to be able to engage and fuel that community. So the best businesses are doing that. Now, you might say, hey, Tim, what do you mean by community, right? I'm a little bit puzzled what you mean by that. Well, let's kind of break it down. Every business has an audience, right? The problem with the word audience is it's a little bit cold. It might be a little bit tied to advertising. It just seems direct one way, right? You speak to an audience. However, community, it's an ecosystem, right? It's two-way communication. It's people flowing ideas from one to another. It's people inspiring from one to another. So, what you'll see here, the way we define communities, is the audience that makes up your business. It's your customers that you need to educate every day. It's your prospects that you need to be able to, educate and reach directly better than the competing businesses. It's your manufacturing and sales channel partners, right? A lot of companies, they have channel partners that are selling for them, but they're outside the business walls, right? They're not understanding the true product differentiators. They're not hearing the messaging from the company. So we need to be able to reach them more effectively. You have employees and new hires, right? Part of the best and strongest thriving communities within a business are the employees, because it's the people making the product. It's people taking the product to market. It's the people serving the customers. And then lastly, you have your local community, right? Good businesses tap into their local community. They hire from the universities around them. They build out charities or donate to charity groups in the community around them, and they want to pour themselves in there. So companies that truly win, they build a community. This is my Longhorn plug, Hook 'em Horns, class of 2008 right here. But, the Longhorn Network, I think, is a perfect example of channel building and community building. Let's kind of talk about what we're seeing right here. So you have the Longhorn Network. For those of you that don't know what it is, it's basically University of Texas's own ESPN. So it's a broadcast channel that's on a lot of the major carriers like AT&T, Uverse, and Dish. And essentially what happens on the Longhorn Network is it's 24/7 broadcasting. So sometimes they're playing the games. We'll have the women's volleyball team game on. We'll have the baseball team on. But a lot of the segments is creating original content. So these images, what you see here, they have little roundtable discussions all the time where they'll bring on a player, and that player will talk about what's happening on the football program, what they're excited about, strategy heading into next week's game. And what they'll do is they'll bring on their coach. I have a photo of here of the legendary coach Mac Brown, because he was the head coach when Longhorn Network started. It was his idea with the athletic team. But basically what University of Texas said, and the reason it formed, is they said, hey, look, we can only recruit in X amount of hours per day. And we can only talk to our potential players and our potential future students so often. What if we built a media network that went outside of the rules of recruiting, went outside of the time constraints that you have on a phone call or texting, and we could go direct from our team, our community of coaches, faculty, student athletes, athletic directors, alumni, professional athletes. We can take their voices and go directly. So that way our football players who are located around the country, they're able to tune into our brand, whether it's 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. They're tuning in and they're engaging with the Longhorn brand. Now, what's so cool about this and what we love as Longhorns is Texas A&M, the famous story with it, is they raised their hand and they said, hey, this is a violation. Why is it fair? Why can Mac Brown go on national TV whenever he wants and give a recruiting pitch to every recruit in the country when we have to abide by the rules of our cell phone and only being able to talk to them at certain hours or certain periods of the year? So NCAA said, no, it's fine. They invested in their own media channel and they can do what they want. And Texas A&M got mad. They left and went to the SEC, and it continues to roll on. The Longhorn Network is continuously pumping their brand to the household of everybody in America. And now you see other programs doing that. And what I'm here to tell you today is, you're able to do this with your own company, right? You're able to take your team's voices and you're able to truly go direct with them. I've got some fun examples of some user generated content here, but this is our partner Microdrones. And what they'll do is they'll literally create media wherever they are. So in this example, they're doing a little spotlight of Aaron Beach, and he's out at an event, and they just whip out their iPhone and they say, "Hey, Aaron, share with the community about who you are. Share with the community what you're excited about. Personalize yourself, personalize our brand." So there they are. They're interviewing him, and then there's fun B-roll shots of his work in action. This is literally done with nothing else other than an iPhone and a little bit of editing. Another example here. This is one of our partners, Red Lion. And Red Lion, they're located all around the world. They have team members everywhere. And when they want to make a Christmas video or a holidays video, they just ask their team members around the world to all record something personal saying happy holidays, maybe show an environment that you like to hang out at or your family or whatever it is. And then they edit that all together. And what they've done is they've decentralized their media creation. They've said, you know what? Sales team, you're a thought leader. Executives, you're thought leaders. Customers, you're thought leaders. The whole community become thought leaders. And they will use technology to unlock all of their voices, just like the Longhorn Network will do, where they have players on 1 minute, coaches on the next, and athletic directors on the next. And what I'm here to tell you is this idea is very easy, right? It's build the channel you own. It's create content that you distribute through that channel. And then you use all the voices of your community to be those voices. And the way you do it is through technology. And the content, it doesn't need to be extremely technical. It just needs to be valuable for the consumer. So allowing them to see themselves in it. It needs to be human and personal because people love authenticity more than technical. And it needs to be regular, right? Part of the way you win today is having a consistent routine, right? I do these webinars every Thursday because I want to build a community and I want this to be consistent for people to come back and invite people to. So to talk a little bit about this, we're going to bring on a special guest, right? It's easy for me to be up here and talk about it, but we're going to bring on a guest who is eating, breathing, and sleeping building community for his network and for his channel consistently. It's James Preble. He's their director of sales channels here at MarketScale, and he has just done a phenomenal job of really building this community. And we're going to have him talk about it. So let's go ahead and loop him in. James, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Tim. Thank you so much for inviting me to join. This is a topic I'm truly passionate about, especially when we are talking about salespeople and content creation, something truly near and dear to my heart. So thank you again for inviting me to join.
No, I'm glad that you're here. James, I want to talk with you specifically about sales teams, right? We broke down the community earlier, like customers and prospects and employees. Today, we're going to focus specifically on sales teams creating content. It's kind of funny, and I'd like for you to speak on this. Oftentimes, the sales teams are the one that are asking for the most content, right? They need something to help close a deal, and they ask very urgently, and they need it now. However, there's usually a bottleneck where marketing can't get to everything. They're setting up the trade show. They're doing something with the website. So when that sales guy pops up needing content, it could take the back burner. And then when the marketer gets to it, the sales guy doesn't use it, right? It's the old adage. So, what do you think how does that create stress with the relationship between sales and marketing when you have more of that traditional marketer creates the content from the team that needs it? How is that stressful on the company and on the team?
Well, I think you hit on it a little bit earlier in your introduction. You were talking about moving station to station and how that is just not the way a business can operate today. And if you think about, and I know as Chief Revenue Officer that this is a process that's so familiar to you, if you think about the demand in speed and turnaround and response that the sales cycle requires, often that has to be instantaneous for that salesperson, and they're looking for constant content to act as their sales tool to enable them to make that connection either with a new prospect or even with current customers and meeting their needs. And so salespeople have found that they need to be able to create that own content autonomously. Obviously, marketing still plays an incredibly important role here because They're designing the framework around that messaging that is going to drive that content and help create evergreen content for an organization. But in order to be instantaneous, really a salesperson has to think as their own autonomous marketer these days.
No, you're exactly right. And, it makes sense though, right? Because like we kind of addressed there, they're talking to the customers every day. They understand the challenges in regards to commoditization that might be taking place. They understand the challenges of commanding a premium, what they need to educate more. And yeah, it's with tools and technology, it's very easy for a sales team member to now create the content they need to, be able to engage. I personally think that sales teams are the best marketer at a company because of those points. What sort of content do you see thriving sales teams really creating, right? When you look at those companies where the sales teams are the best marketers, what channels are they using? What's the type of content they're creating? How are they really building that community, James?
Sure. So we'll stick with the Longhorn Network example. A little bit of a biased panel that we've got on here. I'm a fellow Longhorn with Tim as well. So hook 'em. Just like you said, Mac Brown can hop on at any time and speak to his recruits. And now it's Steve Sarkisian, not Mac Brown, but the same principle still applies. And so sales teams are now enabling that same sort of relationship with their own branded media channel. And that kind of covers a lot of different forms of media. And so short form media allows them to stay incredibly topical. We use the example of football recruits with the Longhorn Network. Think about that as industry news for a salesperson with short form video and the tools and technology that allow for that to be so quickly turned around these days. When there's movement in the industry or a piece of news in the industry or even in the greater financial marketplace, now a salesperson, doesn't have to go to marketing, again, that station to station delay that we talked about, and ask for them to make adjustments on content that is related to that current news. They can now speak to it directly. In addition to that, I think especially in B2B, it is so important for salespeople to show that they have an expertise within the industry that they are speaking to. So they want to be constantly producing content that is on greater industry trends as well, not just something that's happening in the news. So we're also seeing salespeople create incredibly engaging and well-received podcast series or even video podcast series where they're bringing on current customers, their product experts, and they're speaking to those industries. And that just builds them a library that showcases their expertise in the industry that they're selling into.
No, you're exactly right. And, podcasts are so powerful today because it's the idea of episodic, right? You have one host who creates, different episodes. But it's also just such a powerful way to learn, right? What I always like to say, when you're selling, for example, you have to think where your customers spend their time, right? As just an everyday consumer, if I have an interest or a hobby, I tune into a podcast, right? If I want to be entertained, I stream something on demand. Or if I want to feel like I'm a part of a community, I watch, and we keep talking about the Longhorns live, or, God bless us Cowboy fans, we watch the Cowboys live. But it's the same when you're trying to communicate with your customers. And when a sales team member can literally build their own podcast and bring on their customers, bring on their prospects, bring on associations, they just start to build fans, not even of themselves, just of really their company. And it's all thought leadership being shared. Talk a little bit about your show. You have a great show, Point of Scale. It's retail focused. How have you engaged some of the biggest retail groups like NRF, to be a part of your community and to engage the larger community you're looking to build?
No, I appreciate the shout out of the show. I've really enjoyed doing it. And I think that's a major point that I want to talk about in addition to something you mentioned. We live in the information age, and the buying process is really empowered by knowledge. And so the companies that are being successful are the ones that are providing their customers who have already bought the product and they continue a relationship with, or new prospects, the companies that are winning those people over are the ones who are better informing them, being objective about that information and giving that information in an accessible way to their current and prospective customers. And if we think about how that has been traditionally done, we're thinking about white papers. And white papers aren't bad in their essence necessarily. They're informative. They give details that people need to make better decisions for their business, but they're lengthy. Like you said, they're not where people are at with their lives. They're not how we consume information anymore. And so media, especially podcasts, allow for that information to be there in that same objective and informative matter, but in a way that is far more accessible and frankly enjoyable to people to digest than a traditional white paper. And the other thing, and this gets back to point of scale as well, I think it allows for the passion, the true, actual, authentic passion of a salesperson within their industry to come forth in a way that a white paper could never do. So when you hear me on point of scale speaking with NRF, with Toshiba Global Commerce Solutions, you truly hear my experience and my passion for the retail industry coming through in that media. And it would take a novel to have that voice in white paper form. And so media truly allows for both that information and that authentic passion to come through in a way that just wasn't available beforehand.
No, and that's such a good point, right? Because, oftentimes, and we're going to keep speaking to sales for the webinar this week, but, as a salesperson lends their voice to the customer and is teaching and teaching and teaching, they can only talk so technical to some aspect, right? If you're selling something very technical to somebody like a facility manager who's an expert, eventually that facility manager, their knowledge is going to show. And the sales rep will either be a little bit uncertain or, if they're not a good salesperson, they'll try to, act like they know the answer, which is the wrong thing to do. What's cool about media and tools is you can say, hey, look, I have a podcast with our solutions engineer, right? These are great questions. Check out this episode where we actually talked about this. And then that customer can learn from the product specialist. And it doesn't require those product specialists to have to jump on a bunch of sales meetings. They can create content one time, share their technical voice one time. And now that's an asset that, the sales team can use to, better educate and have a more authentic and real sales, process.
Absolutely. The term I like to use, to really illustrate that principle is industry rock star. When you get those, very technical experts on, and again, you hear their passion speaking to those technical aspects as well. They just, because it is their area of expertise, are speaking with a more authentic and more informed voice than even the best salesperson could answer all those questions on. And then you're right that the aspects of media allow for that library to be constantly accessible for people.
Exactly. Now, one kind of holdup is oftentimes marketers, especially, and I don't blame them, they don't really want their sales team creating content because they might say something that's off brand or might not be technically accurate or align with the messaging that they're trying to create digitally. So, James, pretend that you're a marketer, just speak to the marketers on this session right now. But what do you say to that marketer that's kind of asking right now, hey, look, I've got a big sales team. I would love for them to create content, but kind of scared to just let them off the leash. Do you totally let them off the leash, or is there a way to empower them to communicate while still kind of keeping a fence around them, if you will?
Well, I think that goes back to kind of the first question that we spoke to, in that relationship between marketing and sales and how it needs to evolve in this digital age. And, at the end of the day, and, again, a little bit biased here because I am a salesperson, my career has been spent there. Marketers have to realize a few things. A, the health of the brand is going to empower that salesperson to sell, to create revenue, which is their job. So, they are, not going to ever go so off the cuff in my opinion, that they're going to do harm to that would A, affect their own business. And then B, it's that continuous education on the framework of messaging. But I think the marketer has to just realize that without decentralizing this outreach through media, they're just never going to have the amount of points of contact that they could have with media assisting them. So by bottlenecking yourself in and holding that back, you're actually doing more damage than being protective of the brand in the first place. So it's an important relationship that marketing and sales are always speaking on that messaging and working together so that you can empower them, you can decentralize them through media and through tools, and they're going to stay on brand, but let their personality shine through a little bit. That's why Mac Brown was as successful as he was, because he was a good old country boy who spoke with a twang. He wasn't speaking about the engineering program at the University of Texas. He was speaking about the football program at the University of Texas. So you want those things to come through. You want that energy to shine through a little bit while always maintaining the key principles of the brand. So it goes back to that relationship and that constant communication between marketing and sales.
Exactly right. And, I think you're just a bridge, right? I like to see the marketer in 2023 as a symphony or an orchestra conductor, right? They're up there with their, baton or wand, whatever they call it in that world. I don't hold season tickets to the Dallas Symphony, unfortunately, but, when they need music from the violin, there they are with the violin section, there they are with the brass and percussion and the symphony, right? They control the music, right? The conductor is the one controlling, but then it's the band, right? It's the orchestra making the sound, the actual music come together. And that's kind of how I see marketing 2023 as marketers saying, all right, I've got all these sales guys who are knowledgeable. Let's empower them to build their own podcast. Let's allow them to create their own content. But I'm the one kind of telling them kind of what to create, or as they are creating it, I'm kind of in the background approving it, making sure that it's on pace. And then same thing, I've got my engineers over here, my executives over there. So kind of last question as we wrap up here at the half hour mark, James, what would you say to that marketer who just says, hey, look, I want to do all this. I want to empower my community, create more content, but I just feel like I don't have time. I'm no pun intended from my example, but I'm a one-man band here. I don't have time to organize all this. I don't have time to manage it. What do you say to that person? Is it, does it save them time? Does it give them time back? What do you think?
Well, again, it goes back to that decentralization and those media tools that allow for that to happen. And that's why we do what we do here at MarketScale, is to allow the marketer to have turnkey solutions to enable that. Not everyone is going to have those tools in-house, but you have to have access to that technology and to those quick turnkey media solutions in order to get that decentralization, or you're going to be constantly stuck in that station to station monotony that we talked about. And eventually, even the best marketers are going to get overwhelmed with the constant demand and updates that need to be made. So decentralization is just so key. And you'll find that the more that you are decentralizing, the more content you are creating. It is a instantaneous ROI on input and output. And so that would really be what I drive home with that marketer, is that the example of the orchestra is just so perfect, because the sounds are going to be slightly different from each instrument that is being played, each team member that is speaking to these various business communities. But those are going to come together and actually create that symphony. And it's fine if you are a great saxophone player and you play the saxophone alone, but when you add that saxophone into an orchestra, that's when you truly get masterpieces.
That's it. Well, James, I really appreciate your knowledge today and speaking to the community. And, we'll go ahead and wrap up, this week's episode of MarketScale Community Building. I just want to encourage everybody out there to just keep going building community, right? Think about your role within your business organization, or if you're a business owner, think about your personal life, right? We survive and we thrive on community. When times are good, we share it with our community. When times are bad, we need to rely on our community more than ever. So go out today, build the community around you, build the community within your business. And if you're on the sales side, think of ways that you can unlock the voices more to help you sell. But really appreciate everybody joining. Can't wait to see you next week as we do another episode. And until then, keep being community builders out there, y'all. Take care, everybody.